Sometimes life brings us unexpected turns and destroys what seemed unshakable. The protagonist of this story was drawn into a complicated game of circumstances. Initially, everything looked like an ordinary occupation with the virtual world, but reality proved to be much more complex and confusing. With time, it became clear that the original version was far from the truth. What happens when the key figure skillfully evades encounter with the law? Should one continue searching for the truth or admit one's powerlessness before circumstances? When it seems that all paths to solution are closed and the system is not capable of restoring balance, is there still meaning in further attempts? In the family of Santino de Alessandro and Giuseppe Biondo, who were known in Italy for their hospitality and cohesion, 3 sons grew up. One of them, Mario, was interested from childhood in art and photography. This passion for visual creativity later determined his professional path. He became a specialist for audiovisual accompaniment of television programs. Parallel to his work, Mario seriously pursued volleyball and regularly participated in tournaments. Team sport shaped valuable qualities in him: the ability to cooperate, to believe in people, and to accept failures with dignity. His natural charisma and attractive appearance made him the center of attention of many women. Fate brought Mario together with Spanish television presenter Raquel Sanchez Silva during the filming of the reality show Island of Celebrities in Honduras in the year 2011. She, who had completed her journalistic education in the year 1994, was already a well-known personality on television. In her career, the connections of her mother Matilda helped her, although Raquel herself possessed extraordinary intelligence and talent. Despite the age difference of 10 years, an intense feeling ignited between them. Friends remembered how Raquel, who was normally reserved in expressing emotions, openly shared her feelings for Mario. Their connection attracted attention. 2 talented people whose love enchanted the people around them. The story of their relationship quickly became public, since both were prominent figures in the media world. In June 2012, their wedding took place in Sicily, a magnificent celebration in the best Italian tradition. The festivities lasted several days, filled with music, dance, and joy. According to local traditions, such a splendid ceremony should bring the newlyweds a long and happy life. However, fate prepared an unexpected turn for this couple a year after the wedding. The story of this married couple began with an ordinary argument on Wednesday, the 29th of May, 2013. Mario and Raquel, who had lived together for almost a year in a Madrid apartment, quickly found their way back to each other and reconciled. In the evening around 20:30, Raquel, as already planned in advance, set off for her hometown Plasencia. The couple said goodbye warmly in the garage. After his wife's departure, Mario made 3 important calls. The first went to his sister Emanuelle in Sicily. In the conversation, he shared ambitious plans: a new television project, future world travels with his wife, and the creation of a travel blog. The other 2 calls were presumably connected with the acquisition of certain preparations from a local seller. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, cameras recorded how Mario withdrew €110 at the nearest ATM. Interestingly, this money was later not found in the apartment. An hour later, a neighbor noticed him at the entrance of the residential complex. The otherwise so friendly man appeared to her unusually thoughtful and distant, although she saw no obvious reasons for concern. Until midnight, Mario telephoned with Raquel, after which they switched to text messages. The couple discussed personal topics, particularly difficulties with family planning. The 40-year-old Raquel desperately wanted to become a mother, but the attempts remained unsuccessful. Mario suspected that the reason might lie in his earlier illness. That same night, a conversation with his brother Andrea took place, to whom Mario told about many interesting future plans. Communication on social networks and by telephone lasted until 1 o'clock at night. After saying goodbye to his wife under the pretext of sleeping, Mario spent the next hour watching adult entertainment. Later, he searched on Google Maps for the location of a nearby entertainment establishment. At 2:53 at night, his bank card was used in this establishment for payment of 3 drinks. No further transactions were recorded. Mario's evening began in a club, after which he returned to his apartment. At home, he spent time on adult websites, and around 6 o'clock he left his last note on his computer. He sketched the preliminary budget for a new television show that he wanted to start. Before getting up from the computer, he checked his messenger apps for new messages but did not write to anyone himself. After this moment, all activity from Mario ceased. When the next morning arrived, no one could reach him, neither his family nor his wife. The relatives suspected that he was either recovering from strenuous work or was immersed in the development of new projects, which he had recently talked about, which is why they did not disturb him. At this moment, no one was particularly concerned. The situation changed around 3:30, when Raquel, his wife, received a call from Mario's workplace. The producer inquired about Mario's whereabouts. It turned out that he had not appeared for the planned filming. This was completely untypical for him, especially given the fact that a cooking show was to be filmed that day, one of his favorite projects. Mario always pursued his work with special responsibility and dedication. He would never have simply abandoned the team and endangered the filming process. All attempts to reach him via telephone or social media remained unsuccessful. The worried Raquel decided to call her housekeeper, Wilma. The wife asked her to check the apartment and make sure that everything was in order. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, the housekeeper arrived at the location while maintaining telephone contact with Raquel. When she opened the apartment door, she let out a piercing scream when confronted with an unexpected sight. When Wilma determined that something irrevocable had happened to Mario, she immediately ran out of the apartment. She stopped a passing patrol car and reported the incident. Additional emergency forces arrived at the crime scene within 10 minutes. In the apartment, the 31-year-old Mario was found in an unusual position. He wore pajamas, and around his neck was a cloth whose other end was attached to a shelf in the living room. The first examination of the crime scene suggested that it could be an independent action by Mario. During the inspection of the premises, it became clear that all access routes were untouched. Neither on doors nor on windows were there traces of intrusion by foreign persons. The detailed examination of the crime scene revealed no signs of disorder. On Mario's legs, only some minor injuries were found that did not look like defensive traces. These details led the investigators to the original version. Mario's wife, a 40-year-old housekeeper, ended her work after the news and returned home. In conversation with the investigators, she shared details from their private life and mentioned certain preferences of her husband. This information interested the investigators, and they began to consider the version of an accident. Although there were no obvious reasons for doubt, the investigations continued. Raquel insisted on quick cremation, but received a refusal. The experts demanded additional time for all necessary examinations. On the 1st of June 2013, Mario's relatives approached the investigators with important information. The family firmly contradicted the original version. According to their words, Mario was full of enthusiasm, forged great future plans, and was proud of his achievements. His life was going excellently, and there were no reasons for despair. The relatives also spoke out against cremation and insisted on a traditional burial. The incident attracted public attention, since all involved were well-known personalities in Spain. Raquel published a post on social media in which she described her husband as a life-loving and goal-oriented person, but hinted at possible hidden problems. She also suspected the possibility of an accident in connection with certain personal preferences. The widow called on the public to refrain from hasty conclusions and to await the results of the official investigations. After examination of the circumstances of the incident with Mario, the official expert opinion concluded that it was an accident. The experts established the time of the incident at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning. At this time, the man had last used his phone. Based on this data, the investigation was closed. On the 6th of June 2013, the farewell ceremony for Mario Biondo took place in his Italian hometown. The relatives and Raquel participated in the ceremony. Afterwards, the wife decided to renounce the inheritance in favor of Mario's family. This step appeared as a noble gesture. Soon after, Raquel distanced herself from her husband's relatives, sold their shared apartment, and moved to different accommodation. Remarkably, the woman herself submitted her resignation at the television station. Colleagues who spoke with her during this time noticed Raquel's unusual composure. No one saw her upset or dejected. It gave the impression that what had happened had not touched her emotionally. However, her absence from the media world was only brief. Already on the 27th of June 2013, Raquel returned to television and explained her quick return with the desire to distract herself and find comfort in work. At the same time, she began quite soon to meet with a new man. It was the businessman Matthias Dumont, whom Raquel had met during an interview in a show. Mario's relatives were irritated by this behavior. It seemed strange that a woman who had recently enjoyed her life with her husband would enter into a new relationship so quickly. Raquel's unusual behavior raised more and more questions among the people in her environment. Mario's relatives turned to the law enforcement agencies with a request to re-examine all circumstances of the incident and to check his wife's actions. Initially, the police refused to reopen the case, but after persistent requests, agreed to a re-examination. In December 2013, 7 months after the incident, the decision was made to conduct a second expert examination. The investigators questioned all witnesses involved in the case again. Mario's family also brought in 2 independent experts, as they suspected that the original expert opinion might contain errors. The new specialists conducted an in-depth analysis of all circumstances using computer simulations of the situation. The experts discovered inconsistencies in the original version of the incident with Mario. According to their assessment, his position could not have been the result of independent actions. The specialists pointed to several important details: the peculiarities of the posture, the type of markings, and the specifics of the knot on the cloth. All of this indicated the presence of strangers. After receiving this data, Mario's relatives immediately turned to the investigators to add the new information to the file. The investigators checked the submitted material and revised their original conclusions. The case received new momentum and developed in a different direction. The investigation took a completely new turn. Although the time that had elapsed since the incident significantly complicated the investigators' work, many important details were no longer available. The public closely followed the development of events and demanded clarification of all circumstances of the incident with Mario. In his homeland Italy, the local law enforcement agencies initiated a parallel investigation under the influence of the family, which was based on the expert opinions of independent specialists. The Italian investigators visited Spain several times, conducted additional investigations, and spoke with Mario's circle. His wife attracted particular attention. Contradictions were discovered in her accounts. When analyzing the photos from the crime scene, the investigators noticed a full ashtray and many empty beverage cans, which indicated the presence of other people. However, these potential pieces of evidence were not properly investigated. A note explaining the incident was not found. The Italian investigators established that a considerable amount of data was deleted from Mario's computer. Almost 1,000 gigabytes. But the recovery of the information failed due to restrictions from the Spanish colleagues. Mario's mother expressed the assumption that his wife might have deleted compromising materials that he had discovered shortly before the incident. The family suspected that Mario's visit to certain establishments and websites that night was not coincidental. Possibly he was looking for his wife there. Presumably he learned something important that could influence the further events. It turned out that access to Mario's computer was changed after the incident, and subsequently someone deleted files. Remarkably, this happened during the farewell ceremony. An interesting detail: Raquel's brother, a talented computer specialist, was not present at the ceremony and could theoretically have carried out these actions at his sister's request. In May 2014, the public showed renewed interest in Raquel's story. Television people offered her participation in a show about the events with her first husband. but she categorically declined this offer and refused to give comments. But already in September of the same year, she nevertheless had to meet with press representatives. The events took an unexpected turn when Raquel reported persecution by her first husband's mother. In response to this, Mario Biondo's family accused her of lying and of involvement in the events with their son. Despite all accusations, there was no solid evidence against Raquel, and she continued to reject all suspicions. Raquel's life, meanwhile, went on its course. In September 2015, she founded a new family, and soon after, following hormone therapy, she had twins. Remarkably, it later turned out that the conception difficulties lay with her and not with Mario. The father of the little ones was a successful entrepreneur whom she had met during her work at television. While Raquel built her new life, Mario's mother did not cease to get to the bottom of the truth. In a fit of desperation, she published the documents of the police investigation, including the photos from the crime scene. In the recordings, inconsistencies with the original conclusions of the investigators could be seen, who apparently wanted to close the case quickly. Mario's leg position appeared particularly strange. Contrary to the official description of a half-bent position, they were stretched and touched the ground. This information shocked the public and forced the criticized investigators to resume the investigation. By 2016, the situation developed into a court proceeding. A new expert opinion by state experts confirmed the original version of Mario's independent actions. As a result of the trial, Raquel emerged as the winner. The court obligated Mario's mother to pay compensation of €3,000 for moral damage and imposed an 8-day house arrest against her. The story continued to be accompanied by rumors and actively discussed in the media. The television address presented an unexpected version of events. Mario had made the fateful decision himself. According to this version, the main reason was his deep despair over the impossibility of having children with his beloved wife. After this explanation, the Spanish authorities suspended the investigation again. The Italian investigators also had to stop their work on the case due to procedural restrictions. Too much time had passed for new investigations. At the same time, they pointed to significant omissions by their Spanish colleagues in the first examination of the circumstances. In the year 2017, however, a new specialist joined, the Spanish expert Luis Duca. After careful examination of all documents, he came to completely different conclusions that completely refuted the official version of Mario's independent departure. Duca's opinion had particular weight due to his 15 years of experience in solving the most confusing cases. He thoroughly examined all available documents and worked on behalf of Mario's family. The expert confirmed the relatives' doubts. The characteristics stated in the reports did not match the claimed version. The unusual position in which Mario was found appeared particularly strange. There would have been much simpler ways than the chosen extremely uncomfortable posture. The analysis of the condition and temperature indicated that the events occurred significantly earlier than at 6 o'clock in the morning, presumably shortly after midnight. The expert also rejected the version of an accident during special activities. Mario was fully clothed and was not performing specific actions. Using special software and data from the manufacturer of the metal shelf where Mario was located, the specialists determined, in the claimed scenario, he would inevitably have ended up on the floor. The only possible conclusion: the events developed at a different location, and then a staging was created. After re-examination, the specialists discovered a severe brain injury that could have been caused by a strong impact with a blunt object. Astonishingly, this critically important detail was missing from the original expert reports, which gave rise to thoughts of intentional concealment of information. During the course of the investigation, there was an unexpected turn. Raquel changed her original statements. She now expressed the assumption that her husband might have been together with an acquaintance in her absence. According to her statement, this person enjoyed Mario's trust. She also mentioned that her husband might have been in a relaxed state through the consumption of alcohol or other substances, which could have impaired his reaction to danger. the investigators formulated a new hypothesis. An acquaintance of Mario might have been in his house. According to this version, the visitor surprised the homeowner. When Mario lost consciousness, the perpetrator used a cloth. The absence of struggle traces was explained by the suddenness of the incident. Afterwards, everything was staged as a different scenario. This version explained why no burglary traces were found in the apartment. In October 2018, the Italian author Paolo Gentili presented a book about the fate of the good guy, Mario Biondo. The material was created with the participation of the cameraman's mother, who tirelessly searched for the truth about what happened to her son. The book portrayed Raquel Sanchez Silva in an unfavorable light and described her as an insincere person. After the publication on the 5th of November 2018, the Italian authorities approved a third investigation. Specialists from the Anatomical Institute of the Palermo Polyclinic were entrusted with carrying it out. X-rays and computed tomography were performed. The process was monitored by independent experts invited by Mario's family. The year 2019 was marked by the parents filing an official complaint against the forensic pathologist who had worked on site in 2013. The investigation uncovered serious violations in his work. In May 2020, punishment followed not only for him, but also for the doctor and the assistant who conducted the examination. The Mario case received new momentum. Many specialists from various fields of criminology and medicine were brought in. However, a serious problem arose. Many original pieces of evidence and materials lost their credibility, and some important details were lost due to the suspension of the investigation. The revelation of document manipulation caused particular resonance. It turned out that the prosecutor's office had altered PDF files with evidence, social media correspondence, and browser histories. This discovery refuted the original claims by the police that Mario had visited certain websites and communicated with dubious persons that night. A thorough check of the network connections brought an unexpected discovery. 2 devices were connected to the home Wi-Fi that night, although it was assumed that Mario was alone. The investigations brought interesting discrepancies to light. No one could confirm that Mario had actually left his apartment that evening. The only signs of his alleged movements were transactions with his bank card, first at the ATM, then in a club. However, the logical question arose: was it really him? The impression emerged as if someone had intentionally used his card to damage Mario's reputation by portraying him as a lover of dubious pleasures. This version was supported by a strange fact. In the club, only drinks were paid for. No additional services of the establishment were used. Unfortunately, the recordings from the ATM and street surveillance cameras are no longer preserved over the years. It remained a mystery why a well-known person who is constantly in the spotlight would visit such an establishment and pay with their card instead of cash. The medical examination found only a small amount of alcohol in Mario's organism. Even the neighbor, who was initially certain she had seen Mario in the evening, later doubted her statements. It turned out that he had planned a motorcycle trip for the next day and had checked the weather forecast. These plans did not fit with the version of what happened afterwards. The waiter from the restaurant opposite the house told something amazing. Since early morning, the guests had been discussing the incident and saw police and paramedics in front of the house. But how was this possible if the housekeeper had only discovered Mario after 16 o'clock? The investigations were complicated by several factors. Most evidence had lost its relevance due to time. It was impossible to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. And the original work of the investigators contained so many protocol violations that the materials had to be collected anew. In August 2022, the Spanish court decided to close the case due to lack of evidence. But Mario's family did not give up. Thanks to their persistence, the case was reclassified and reopened in March 2023. The relatives traveled to Spain again to clarify the circumstances and prove the involvement of the former wife in the incident with Mario. In their opinion, only she could have been involved. In the last weeks, the spouses had had serious conflicts due to pregnancy problems. A divorce was looming. It was suspected that the wife did not want to share the assets. In addition, Mario had learned a secret from her, which could also have been a reason for the conflict. It was precisely the wife who insisted on immediate cremation, as if she wanted to hide something. Only she and the elderly housekeeper had keys to the apartment, but no one believed in the latter's involvement. The relatives were certain. Mario would not have invited anyone in the middle of the night, as he had to get up early the next morning. According to Mario's relatives, Raquel had thought through every detail with her sharp mind. She secured a safe alibi through a trip to another city and organized everything through acquaintances in Linz to create the appearance of a random incident. In doing so, she tried to damage her husband's reputation through stories about his preference for dubious pleasures and visiting certain establishments, although it later turned out that she herself showed interest in such activities. The Mario family finds it suspicious how she intentionally introduced false information into the case files. Her hasty move out of the apartment seemed as if she wanted to hide something by disposing of the property, and her renunciation of the inheritance, which appeared to be a noble gesture, proved in reality to be a calculated decision. Mario had more debts than assets, and a high inheritance tax was also due. Therefore, she simply decided not to take on these obligations. Particularly remarkable was her appearance at the farewell ceremony. Raquel came with personal assistants who directed her every movement: when to appear, how to approach, where to stand for advantageous shots. She even asked Mario's relatives to grant her a moment alone at the farewell site, supposedly for a personal moment, but actually for a photo shoot. The relatives were also surprised by her request not to allow Christian, Mario's nephew, to attend the ceremony. She justified this with concern for the teenager's psyche, but later it turned out Raquel had signed a contract with journalists for exclusive photos, and the boy's presence could have disturbed the staged shots. Experts who studied Raquel's behavior characterize her as a person with a special personality structure: manipulative, narcissistic, and virtuosic at hiding her true nature. Behind the image of a charming woman, Raquel hid another side of her character, which her husband noticed. Shortly thereafter, the said incident occurred. Mario's relatives are convinced Raquel organized everything perfectly by using her intellect and manipulation skills. Now, despite obvious suspicious circumstances, it is extremely difficult to prove her involvement. 10 years have passed, but Mario's family does not give up their efforts to bring the truth to light. The 50-year-old Raquel leads a normal life. She has started a new family, focused on her career, and continues to reject all assumptions about her role in this incident. On a February morning, 1995, a disturbing incident occurred in Twin Falls, Idaho. When Regina Krieger's father looked into his daughter's room to check on her, he found an empty space with traces of an incident. The search for Regina continued for a long time. When the experts could finally begin examining the circumstances, they were shocked by what Regina had to endure in those final minutes. What happened in this quiet American city made even experienced investigators shudder. In the year 1995, about 32,000 people lived in this cozy town. Today, the population has doubled. The place seemed ideal for a quiet life and raising the growing generation, but even here, people with dark intentions sometimes hid. Regina Krieger was born on the 3rd of March 1980 as the daughter of Rhonda Freeman and Daniel Krieger. She was known for her radiant smile and sociability. She had a younger brother named Clifton. Regina was interested in music and water skiing. She was actively involved in the life of the local Lutheran church, but over time, changes began to emerge in her life. In June 1994, her parents divorced. Regina suffered greatly from the family separation, and the parents' lengthy disputes over property division only worsened the situation. In September, she expressed the desire to stay with her father. The mother, absorbed in the property disputes, decided not to escalate the situation and agreed. From December 1994, Regina lived with her father. Initially, everything went well, but soon her behavior began to change. In January 1995, during her time at Burley High School, she began spending time with a group that caused concern among the adults. The parents noticed the changes but could not figure out their cause, and relationships became increasingly tense. Finally, Regina decided to break contact with this group. For support, she was prescribed counseling sessions with a psychologist who was to help her deal with the feelings about her parents' separation. Between Regina and the psychologist developed a trusting relationship that was a great support to her. One day, she shared with him her plans to leave school because of poor grades and frequent absences. This happened after a warning from the school about a possible expulsion for exceeding the permissible number of absent hours. Later, she changed her mind and decided to improve the situation. On the 27th of February, 1995, Regina again spoke about dropping out of school and finding work. But the psychologist convinced the teachers to give her another chance by explaining the difficult phase in her life. She had to attend some important lessons with exams to collect the necessary points and be promoted to the next class. Regina decided to use this opportunity. On the same day after classes, she returned to the house where she lived with her father and brother. Their rooms were on the first floor, while Regina had her own in the basement. In the evening, the family came together, had dinner, and discussed various topics, including school. Around 23 o'clock, everyone went to sleep. That was the last time the relatives saw Regina. On the morning of the 28th of February, 1995, Regina's brother Clifton called for his sister when he noticed her absence. When he received no answer, he went down to her room. There he discovered disturbing traces, but Regina herself was nowhere to be found. The young man immediately ran to his father when he saw the disturbing scene. When the man came downstairs, his son's statement was confirmed. The bedroom was empty and suspicious traces could be seen on the floor. He immediately called emergency 911 and began calling all his daughter's acquaintances and friends to find out her whereabouts. The father hoped that Regina, as a difficult teenager, had simply gone to friends. But these hopes were dispelled when all her close ones denied this. The law enforcement officers who arrived reacted rather coolly to the situation. They inspected the premises without particular zeal and only took a blanket with traces and a practice sword for martial arts. The officers merely determined that there were no signs of a break-in in the house. They then suspected that Regina might have left on her own and staged the incident. The father absolutely disagreed with this version. The investigators listened to the father's arguments and began the investigation. Important to mention is that at that time, there were no modern methods of trace examination and surveillance systems, which significantly limited the investigators' possibilities in searching for clues that were already scarce. The checks and interrogations began. Regina's father and brother came under suspicion first. They were subjected to a lie detector test. Both passed the test successfully, but the father continued to be considered as a possible participant since the police had no other versions. Father and brother insisted that they had slept soundly and had not heard any strange noises during the night. In the case of Regina's disappearance, there were many unclear points. In her room, traces of an incident were discovered that indicated something serious had happened there. However, the evidence found did not provide a complete picture of what had occurred. The investigators suspected two possibilities. Either Regina could flee from a perpetrator or she fell into the hands of a known person. The latter was indicated by the absence of break-in traces. Apparently, she had opened the door to someone herself. An important source of information for the investigators became Regina's personal diary. In it, she described her life in detail, especially her feelings about her parents' divorce. There, the investigators also found entries about her secret boyfriend named Isidra. She concealed this relationship from her family, although she had been meeting with him frequently lately. According to the diary, Isidro was a young Latin American who lived in Twin Falls. His grandparents lived in Burley, not far from the Krieger family house. He drove a green pickup and no longer attended school. The police carefully checked this information and tried to find the young man for a conversation, but the search remained unsuccessful. They could find neither the described car, nor his relatives, nor Isidra himself. It was believed that Regina had invented the story because of her emotional distress from her parents' separation. Thus, she possibly tried to deal with the pent-up emotions, which is why no significance was attached to her stories. The Krieger family found themselves in a hopeless situation and did not know how to proceed and where to search. Of course, everyone hoped for a good outcome and did not give up the search. In an attempt to find new clues and witnesses, about 30,000 flyers were distributed in the city streets. On the 15th of April 1995, a disturbing discovery was made in the Snake River, 15 kilometers from the Krieger's house. The experts determined that the evidence found was connected to a young person under 20 years old. By the 17th of April, it could be confirmed thanks to dental records. It was Regina Krieger. The traces at the scene indicated tragic circumstances. After that, the missing persons search became another, more serious investigation. The news spread quickly in the city and caused unrest among the residents. In the small settlement, fears arose about the presence of a dangerous person who breaks into houses. Family father Krieger was particularly concerned. He still had a younger son, and the father was worried about his safety. Despite the increased vigilance of the residents, however, the investigation did not progress. The law enforcement officers received no reports about suspicious persons or useful clues. Later, new details became known to the investigators. It turned out that Regina, when she came into contact with dubious company, got to know dealers of prohibited substances. Among them was a certain Gilbert Flores Rodriguez. The investigators suspected that a money debt for received goods could be the reason for the incident. Gilbert, who had no official work, frequently moved between the cities of Burley and Twin Falls and pursued his illegal business. He was known as a member of a local criminal group. The substances that Regina acquired were not cheap, which is why the debt amount could be hundreds of dollars. However, there was no direct evidence against Gilbert. Later, anonymous calls came into the police that pointed to this dealer's involvement in the incident. When the police officers tried to determine the identity of the callers, they ended the conversation out of fear of consequences. Nobody wanted problems with this criminal element. The unconfirmed reports contained no concrete details, and there was still no evidence against Rodriguez. The investigators only considered him as a participant in illegal business with prohibited substances. Although the contact of an adult unemployed dealer with young people seemed extremely suspicious, the law enforcement agencies needed solid evidence for bringing serious charges. When investigating Regina's environment, the investigators directed their special attention to one person. Among her acquaintances was Cody, who, like her, had acquired prohibited substances from Gilbert. It turned out that they had spent time with this dealer on that fateful night. During questioning, Cody told that his friend had spent the night unconscious in the bathroom. However, his statements were confused. He was visibly nervous, changed his versions of events, and seemed to be hiding something. The impression arose that the young man was frightened and avoided an open conversation. The police officers met his words with mistrust and continued to regard Rodriguez as the main suspect. In '96, the law enforcement agencies actively searched for Gilbert. It turned out that he had already been arrested in '91 and '93. The investigators suspected that he was distributing prohibited substances but could not gather enough evidence for an arrest. To catch the skillful dealer, they decided to set a trap. The police arrested a certain Joe who had previously bought from Gilbert. They offered him to overlook his previous offenses in exchange for help in catching the dealer. Joe agreed and acquired goods for $1,500. This enabled the arrest of Rodriguez on the 18th of November '96. But the problems were just beginning. The experienced dealer planned to defend himself actively. There were rumors about his involvement in the disappearance of Blake Morgan Jr. and our protagonist, Regina Krieger. These incidents actually had something in common. In both cases, the perpetrators entered the houses through a window. However, Morgan was not taken away, unlike Regina. On the 10th of April '96, the investigations established those involved in the incident. It turned out that Cody, one of Gilbert's customers and friends, and his stepbrother Jesus were involved in the incident with Black. For Jesus, Rodriguez was a real role model whose requests were fulfilled unconditionally. This was because Gilbert replaced his father for him and prepared him for participation in his business. The reason for the incident was not the debts for prohibited substances, as initially assumed. The story was connected with Angela, who was with Gilbert. According to her words, Black had once acted disrespectfully toward her, and Rodriguez decided to stand up for her. This led to Jesus threatening Black with a weapon on the 9th of April 96, 2 weeks before Regina's disappearance. On the eve, the group and Black randomly encountered each other in a bar. Gilbert immediately shared his revenge plans with his brother for the inappropriate behavior toward his girlfriend. However, they decided to proceed more carefully and not attract the attention of the bar guests. Around 2:30 at night, they tried to break into Black's house but found nobody in it. After an hour, they returned. This time, they found the homeowner sleeping. After they had broken open the door, Cody and Jesus carried out their plan. It was obvious that Gilbert was behind all these incidents, but he acted through other people and stayed in the background, which is why one could not connect him with these cases. Later, all 3 participants were arrested and taken into custody. They were charged in the Blake case, but not even considered as possible participants in the Regina Krieger case. Strangely, the law enforcement agencies did not even try to establish a connection between these cases. For inexplicable reasons, the investigators paid no attention to the reports of unnamed eyewitnesses who had previously called the police and did not believe the conversations about the similarity of the incidents. The dangerous dealer of prohibited substances was in investigative custody awaiting the court decision. At this time, the Iowa Drug Enforcement Agency tried to establish the identity of the informants. At that time, Gilbert let slip among other inmates the remark that he would like to know the names of these people and hinted that he had already taken care of 2 informants and intended to do the same with the rest. On the 26th of June 97, Gilbert was sentenced to 30 years in prison, but was released after 10 years. For some incomprehensible reason, the investigation of the Regina case was suspended. The investigators never connected him with the dealer, although all evidence pointed to him. The case files and witness statements went into the archives for a long time. A new turn in the investigations came only through Rodriguez's accomplice, Cody Thompson, who had also spent time with the dealer of prohibited substances. The young man concealed important information for years, the disclosure of which helped to close the long-past investigation. In 2013, the case gained new momentum when another investigator dealt with it. He began with the thorough examination of all previously collected materials and evidence. When examining the photos from the crime scene, he noticed a trace on the ground that indicated that Regina had been brought over the stairs to the backyard. Amazingly, the previous investigators had overlooked this detail. When examining the witness statements, the investigator paid special attention to a certain Cody who was serving a life sentence. His description of the events on the night when Regina disappeared was contradictory. Cody had been behind bars since a very young age. Now he was 31 years old. He had committed serious crimes, breaking into a foreign apartment, attacking a guard during an escape attempt, as well as participation in Blake's disappearance. After more than 20 years, the new investigator could put together the facts that seemed obvious. The investigator was convinced of these people's involvement in Regina's disappearance, but everyone remained silent. Then he decided to speak with Cody's former cellmate, a man who was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2009. Since he had nothing to lose, he agreed to cooperate with the investigators. Thanks to his statement, the events of that fateful night could be reconstructed. Late in the evening of the 27th of February 1995, Regina went to her room after 23 o'clock. At this time, Gilbert and Cody were driving aimlessly through the area. Suddenly, the dealer remembered an unfinished matter and asked to stop at one of the houses. Gilbert left the car in the alley next to Regina's apartment. Cody remained in the car and watched how his friend crept through the bushes and climbed over the fence on the yard side. He entered the house alone. After some time, Gilbert appeared again and called Cody to him. The dealer confessed that not everything had gone according to plan and asked for help. After that, he returned to the house and then went to the car with a heavy load that was concealed with a blanket with traces of the incident. Cody helped his friend but never learned what had happened inside. They drove away, but nearby Gilbert hid a certain object. After that, both went to a party where Rodriguez walked around unabashedly in a soiled undershirt. Presumably, the guests called the police because of the suspicious behavior. Later, the friends drove to a mutual acquaintance where they got themselves in order and changed their clothes. They drove about 15 kilometers to the bridge over the Snake River. Cody became nervous. Then Gilbert pointed a weapon at him and ordered him to get rid of the load. The frightened young man carried out the instruction. When Cody came home, he locked himself in his room. He screamed in his sleep and seemed very disturbed, which his relatives noticed. The young man did not know the identity of the person he had thrown from the bridge. He tried to forget it like a nightmare, especially since Gilbert threatened him with serious consequences. Only later at school did Cody realize that it was Regina who everyone was searching for. He panicked when he recognized his involvement in the incident. The young man's silence was also explained by Gilbert's threats against his family. After the conversation with the investigators, Cody confirmed the information he had received from the cellmate. For cooperation with the law enforcement agencies, he was not prosecuted in the Regina Krieger case, although he was already serving a life sentence without chance of release. On the 20th of February 2019, the law enforcement agencies arrested the drug dealer Gilbert Rodriguez. He denied his involvement in the incident with Regina. Several people observed how he hid a knife nearby. Anonymous informants who had previously given tips to the police also came forward. In October 2021, the court sentenced 58-year-old Gilbert Flores Rodriguez in the Regina Krieger case. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of early release. This decision took 26 years. The outcome of the case brought relief to both Regina's relatives and the entire city. The residents were glad that the dangerous criminal would never be free again.